All right, welcome back. We're diving into a story today that sounds like something out of a movie. How a single social media post could potentially tear apart a 75-year-old alliance. Let's get right into it. I mean, seriously, can one country just force another to sell its territory in the 21st century? It sounds like a question from a history textbook, right? But believe it or not, this is at the very heart of a crisis unfolding right now, right between some of the world's most powerful democracies.
And boom, this is how it all kicked off. On January 17, 2026, a single social media post took what was a diplomatic disagreement and just blew it up into an all-out economic ultimatum. It sent shockwaves clear across the Atlantic.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around what's happening here, we kind of need a new term for it. Systematic territorial extortion. Look, this is not your typical trade war over steel or cars. No way. This is about using economic muscle to force a country to literally give up a piece of itself. It's a brand new and, frankly, a very dangerous playbook in international relations, one that could completely rewrite the rules of global power.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. The Greenland Ultimatum. How exactly did this whole thing work? Let's break down the American demand and what it immediately meant for Europe.
Washington basically started what you can only call an economic doomsday clock. It started ticking on January 17th. By February 1st, bam, a 10% tariff hits. But the real deadline, the big one, is June 1st. If Greenland isn't sold by then, those tariffs jump to a devastating 25%. This 4-month countdown is designed for one thing and one thing only: to create maximum economic pain and political panic, forcing Europe into a choice between its sovereignty and its economy.
Now, here's the thing. The U.S. didn't just target the entire European Union. Nope, this was a surgical strike against 8 specific nations. And the reason why is so important, these are the countries that have sent troops or support for Greenland's defense. The goal here is crystal clear: divide and conquer. Punish the nations that show solidarity and hope that everyone else just stays quiet.
But this all begs the question, right? Why would you risk a 75-year historic alliance over a giant frozen island? Well, Washington claims it's not about expansionism. They say it's about something much, much bigger: existential defense.
So, the official reason is this project called the Golden Dome. The best way to think about it is like a massive planetary missile shield. And according to the White House, the geometry just doesn't work without building a critical piece of that shield on the roof of the world, which is Greenland. They're framing this as a non-negotiable step to protect the homeland in an increasingly unstable world.
But is that really the whole story? I mean, the U.S. argues that owning Greenland is essential for national defense. But independent defense experts, they're painting a very different picture. They're saying, sure, Greenland is a great spot for radars, but existing treaties already give the U.S. all the access it needs. So this demand for total ownership, they argue, seems to be way more about political control than any real technical need. And that raises some serious questions about the real motives behind this whole high-stakes demand.
So, to build this Golden Dome, the White House has put a pretty staggering price tag on it: $175 billion. That's a massive investment in national security.
But wait for it. Almost immediately, independent think tanks came out with their own analysis, and a very different number. Their estimate? Over $1 trillion. That huge gap between the numbers suggests the real cost of this project isn't just financial, it's political too.
So, to fund this trillion-dollar vision and to secure Greenland, Washington unleashes its most powerful non-military weapon, its economy. Let's take a look at how this weapon is designed.
The strategy is a pretty brutal 3-step process. Step 1, slap a 10% tariff on all goods from those 8 target nations. That immediately creates panic and uncertainty. Step 2, let that fear build. And then, Step 3, the final blow, escalate to 25% to force a political surrender before that June 1st deadline. This isn't about trade, folks. It's about coercion, plain and simple.
And the impact of this weapon is, well, it's devastatingly clear. Just look at the exposure here. For Germany's world-famous auto industry, a 25% tariff would be catastrophic. It would basically price their cars out of the market overnight. And it's the same story for French luxury goods and even for the UK's service sector. This weapon is aimed right at the economic heart of Europe.
Now, facing this kind of unprecedented economic blackmail, you might expect Europe to just fold. But they didn't. Instead, they rolled out a surprisingly sophisticated, multi-layered defense.
Europe's first line of defense is this simple but really powerful legal argument. Denmark literally can't sell Greenland. You see, the 2009 Self-Government Act, which was passed by a referendum in Greenland, states that only the people of Greenland can decide their future. So the Danish government has no legal right to sell the island. That makes the entire U.S. demand not just unreasonable, but actually illegal.
But Europe didn't just stop with a legal argument. They made a symbolic but incredibly powerful military move. It's called Operation Arctic Endurance, and you can think of it like a military tripwire. It's a clear message to Washington. An attack on Greenland is an attack on all of us.
So what they did was deploy a small number of elite troops from all of these major European powers to Greenland. Now, the goal isn't to fight the U.S. military. That would be insane. The point is to act as that tripwire. Any hostile action by the U.S. against Greenland would now also be an incident involving French, German, and British soldiers. That dramatically raises the stakes. It's a classic Cold War tactic, really, designed to deter a bigger power by making sure any aggression triggers a much wider conflict.
And finally, Europe readied its own economic weapon. It's called the Anti-Coercion Instrument, or ACI for short. And you've got to love this analogy. If the U.S. tariff is a sledgehammer, the ACI is a surgeon's scalpel. Instead of just a blunt instrument, the EU has a tool that can target the U.S. economy with precision, minimizing collateral damage while maximizing political pressure.
So at this point, this whole confrontation has become bigger than Greenland. It's bigger than tariffs. At its core, this has turned into a battle for the very soul of the Western alliance.
So, the board is set for a game of high-stakes geopolitical chess. On the military front, you've got the U.S. playing its Golden Dome gambit, countered by Europe's tripwire defense. Economically, it's punitive tariffs versus the anti-coercion instrument. Legally, it's the right of purchase against the right of self-determination. And politically, a U.S. divide-and-conquer strategy is running straight into a surprisingly united European resistance.
Which brings us to one last pretty sobering question. For more than 75 years, NATO is built to protect its members from outside threats. But what happens to that alliance when its most powerful member becomes the biggest threat to another's sovereignty? The answer to that question is going to define the future of the West.